everyone. I'm meteorologist Jacob Wycoff, joined by our executive weather producer, Terry Eliasen. We like hopping on here and doing this weather conversation. Sometimes we don't get enough time in the weather department to talk weather.
We need more time? There's never enough time.
There's never enough time. So this is our opportunity to just kind of dive into things and just talk weather with you.
First off, can you believe it's November? Like, the weekend sort of was, you know, you're busy over the weekend. I mean, I know it was November 1st, Friday, but man, it's November 4th already.
I know.
Like,
the only reason my mind has registered that is you drive along on the pike and all the leaves have fallen, right? And so for me, that is the indication that, all right, we're beyond October. It's now in the dismal November.
At least this is my, again, I'd hate to belabor the point, but my least favorite month of the year is November. If you take out, I mean, Thanksgiving aside, this really, to me, this weekend, the sunsets are now 4:30. It's like, what are we doing?
What are we doing?
What are we doing? It's a tough time of year. I don't want to get into the whole should we avoid the changing of the clocks thing. I think it's kind of silly, but here we are, November 4th.
I honestly thought 2 years ago that I guess I missed the update that it didn't get signed into law.
Clearly not.
But we're still doing it.
But anyways, new month, but same weather story, pretty much.
Same weather story. Incredibly dry. Incredibly dry. In fact, our drought situation, the newest drought monitor that came out on Thursday, increased our severe drought from no severe drought to 14%, and our moderate drought from 35% to 70%. That's a big change.
Yeah, and this is we have not seen severe drought at this level in our area for a couple of years. I think it was 2022 in October was the last time we had, you know, some form of severe drought in our area. So first time in a couple of years, and again, really no significant rainfall in sight.
Yep. Terry, a lot of times you talk about this. You know, I've worked here at WBZ for almost 8 years now, and I remember one of my first days is you said, like, it's either boom or bust. You mentioned 2022 as a severe drought season. Then last year, incredibly wet. Now we're back to severe drought. That's a perfect example of the boom or bust.
The extremes seem to be becoming more frequent, which is sort of, you know, typically in the past, oh, this is a once in a 100-year event, or this is a once in a 25. Well, we're doing this. Like, there's
no middle ground.
There's no middle ground.
Right.
It's either raining every weekend or it's sunny and dry with brush fires.
Right.
Like, you know, at least that's the way it's been the last several years, anyways.
And so you mentioned that brush fire risk today. Lower risk, but still elevated because we don't have any rain. So we have a special weather statement that's in effect for today. I think over the next couple of days, I chatted with the National Weather Service a little bit. They said that they may not elevate the area to a red flag warning tomorrow, but they're reevaluating for Wednesday. But regardless, our air quality is really poor. These are official sensors, the maybe more expensive sensors, showing some moderate air quality issues as you go up towards the North Shore. But when you get into some of these maybe home units, a little bit less expensive, but you're able to place more of them, Peabody was showing very unhealthy levels of air quality. And so it really just depends on which direction that wind is blowing, that smoke is blowing. The bottom line is, if you live in the North Shore, if you live in Essex County or extreme kind of eastern Middlesex County, the air quality is poor in your neighborhoods.
Yeah, and it's highly variable, obviously. Again, you said dependent upon where the brush fires are, which way the wind is blowing. So obviously, if you are in the direction of where the smoke is blowing, you know it, right? We saw Sky Eye was up not long ago over Middleton, and we couldn't see any flames per se, but there was definitely smoldering and a lot of smoke. So anyone downwind of any of those brush fires certainly feeling it, and you know, I don't foresee any significant changes in the coming days. The pattern is what it is, and at least for this week, it's going to continue.
I think this is just incredible. So we've had 2 months and a couple of days for meteorological fall. And for Worcester, it is, at the moment, the driest fall to date. By far, with no real prospects of rain in the extended forecast. Boston, almost the same sort of story because we have second place. I think one of the most impressive things here is you talk about just the lack of rainfall. In the month of January, in the month of March, we picked up 4 and some change inches in each of those months. Meanwhile, the last 2 months, we've barely picked up 2¼ inches.
Yeah, it's also interesting to me, like, look at the other years on this graphic, and the same was true in Worcester. like we don't have dry weather. Like back in the early 1900s, there was a lot of sort of periods of really dry. You hear about the Dust Bowl period and all that. We really haven't had anything quite like this any time recently. I mean, you can look, it's pretty much 80 years or so since we had anything nearby. That was 1946.
Right.
So dry falls like this typically, you know, it's a rare thing.
It's hard to come by.
It really is. Yeah.
And there's no real rain in the forecast. Maybe a few raindrops here or there. There's a couple on radar as you go out into the Berkshires today, and as the warm front continues to pass through, we may get a couple of raindrops tomorrow morning. But this isn't the soaking type of rain that we absolutely.
I mean, we're talking about drops, something that's barely measurable, and at this point, I don't see anything. The next real chance is probably like late Sunday night into Monday.
Right. So Veterans Day.
Right.
Yep.
And that certainly is, you know, being 7 days out is far from locked in. And again, like we've said on this before. Dry begets dry. So you get into one of these patterns and it's like, okay, there's a front coming up on Friday or on Sunday, whatever. You know, maybe that'll help out. And then the closer in time you get to it, it just seems to be like less and less.
It dries up as it approaches.
Right.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens on Sunday night, Monday. But again, the next 7 days, more of the same.
Yeah. So this is an incredible graphic here where the first 3 months of the year, 2 of the 3 had over 4 inches for their rainfall surplus, February being a pretty dry month. But then the last 3 months seen an incredible just deficit building. So starting in September, I will say this, almost starting in July, right? Because July we had a 2-inch deficit, barely any surplus in August, and then it's just been incredibly dry September, October, November.
Yeah, so if you take it since July, the deficit in Boston, just doing some quick math, is somewhere between 7 and 8 inches, something like that.
Yep.
And that's, again, it's still thought of as a short-term drought. This is not, you know,
like California or something like that.
As everybody knows, we were very wet all of last year and to start this year. But nonetheless, it really depends on where do we go from here. And this time of year, not the worst time to be dry. Obviously, the brush fires are a problem, but there's not as much water being used. And if people don't have the irrigation on, the farmers aren't really...
Growing season's ended.
Yeah, so if there's any time of year, I guess, to have a drought, I suppose this is probably the best. But nonetheless, if it keeps going, it's going to cause more issues.
Absolutely. Yeah. And you... Eric and myself, we went back and we saw the top 10 driest fall seasons, and then we compared it to the subsequent winter. And 8 out of 10 of those winters were below average when it came to snowfall. The average of those 10 dry fall seasons were 28 inches. Our average winter is about 50 inches, 49 inches or so. But the same numbers that you saw on the driest falls for Boston and Worcester, 1914, 1916, 1946, 52, all of those had fairly dry winters, snowfall.
Winters,
yeah. So incredible, something to think of. You know, we always say that November sometimes is a harbinger of what's to come. And so if we start to flip the pattern around, maybe that's good if the kiddos want the snow.
I was just about to say that. I think that this is certainly telling, and it would certainly make you want to favor a relatively dry or snowless winter. But I do think that the next 3 to 4 weeks are really important. I think that, and again, the next 7 to 10 days don't look all that different, but if we can somehow flip the pattern, say mid-month, and we end up getting into a stormier or wetter pattern towards the end of November, that could totally flip, like you said, flip the script on sort of the winter forecast. And I will say and add that we're going to have our little winter forecast as we usually do here at WBZ. We're planning for it in a couple of weeks, so stay tuned for that. But this is certainly a big part. November is an important month, and that's kind of why we don't like to do our winter forecasts too early.
Yeah.
And National Weather Service, a lot of these other organizations come out with it in September, October. But the later you wait, the more data you have.
Sure.
And I think that, you know, mid to late November, by the time we get there, we'll have a much better feel. But, you know, as of right now, it would be hard to forecast an above average snow winter.
Yeah, so remember this, you know, as we get into the season, like, yep, it was a dry fall, and we had some data that kind of pointed to that.
Yeah.
Mentioned the brush fire concern. Over the next couple of days, we will start to churn up the wind a little bit. I think tomorrow's breezy, Wednesday, like late Tuesday night into Wednesday is windy. So when you have those type of conditions, and again, just the dry ground, the one thing that may be working in our favor ever so slightly is the relative humidity values aren't bone dry. I struggle to say that that's really going to help us, but it may not hurt us as much.
Certainly wouldn't hurt us. Yeah. So the last couple of weeks, we've had really low dew points, really low, like relative humidity levels in the 20, 30, 40% range. Next couple of days certainly is higher than that.
Yeah.
50, 60, 70%.
Yep.
So it doesn't hurt us, right? So that's the one thing. But if it's going to be warm and windy the next couple of days, it's really hard to find any reason to feel optimistic that these brush fires are still going to be happening.
Right. We've seen it in Munson. They had a big fire the last couple of days. Middleton, Salem area continuing to burn. They're struggling. I think last check 70% contained, still smoldering. And when you have winds that are gusting 20 to 30 miles per hour,
there's only so much you can do.
Yeah. And the firefighters are just working so hard to try to stay in front of it. But this is what we're expecting heading into Wednesday, 30 to 40 mile per hour gusts possible. And even I would say into Thursday, we might be a bit breezy, but the wind direction will shift to the northwest. So here are some of the gusts over the next 24 hours or so.
It's really persistent, and that's the thing. Like, there's really not much break for the next couple of days.
Yep.
So just think about all those all the embers, it's all just simmering around, and all it takes is they fly up into the air, they hit a gust of 25, and that can travel quite a distance. Yep. And that's how you get, uncontrolled wildfires.
And they're trying to fight fire with burning the fire lines and seeing if they can have that fire meet up with the places that have already burned a little bit. But in places like Milford over the weekend, we had an arson. Yeah. Someone set a fire. Fortunately, the firefighters there were able to get in front of it and put it out fairly quickly. But that's the other thing we're up against as humans.
And I don't think I don't know that everybody's as dialed into this as we are. They probably aren't.
Sure.
And so this is the time of year when a lot of folks, you're in your backyard, you're collecting leaves, and you think, oh, I've got it under control. I can just put it in my whatever. You have a little sort of fire pit. I'll burn the leaves in there. What could go wrong? Again, situations like this, one little ember flies up, hits an area of dry brush, and people don't realize how quickly it can spread and happen right now. So
highs tomorrow, we're back into the upper 60s and low 70s. No excuses to get out and vote.
No weather excuses.
No weather excuses, I should say, yes.
Yeah.
So as you're waking up and heading to the ballot boxes in the mid-50s, then by lunchtime near 70 degrees, heading home 70, and then even as the polls close, you're pretty comfortable. You're in the middle 60s.
Very pleasant day, and I think countrywide, there's really not anything major going on. There's some wet weather going on well into the Midwest, but certainly the East Coast is looking mighty fine tomorrow.
Yeah, looking good.
That's good news.
And then we're record temperatures heading into Wednesday. If Boston were to hit 77, we would be at the record territory. But mid to upper 70s, you're talking.
Here we go again.
20 degrees above the average high temperature for this time of year.
Third week in a row where we've had somewhere in the midweek range, whether it be Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, we've had a run at a record. And this would be the third straight week with a record if it were to happen. So yeah, right now we're forecasting near or above, just above the records.
For Boston and Worcester. Both of those records were set just 2 years ago as well. So the next 5 days, we're going to stay mainly above average until we get towards the weekend. Importantly, dry each and every day for the most part. A stray sprinkle here or there, but otherwise it is dry. Tuesday into Wednesday going to be our warmest days, and then things start to slowly trail off with that frontal passage Thursday. Northwest wind, cooler air starts to spill in for the end of the week.
You see like 55 on the weekend, and in comparison, that looks cold, but that's basically what it should be. We're struggling just to get back to the average right now.
Yeah, like a day like today with the cloud cover that we have. You and I looked at it yesterday. Boston hit 47 degrees for the high temperature. It wasn't the last time we hit 47 was April 18th.
Right.
So it's been a while.
It's been a while since we've actually had real cold. And there was some frost on the windshield this morning. That may be the last. If you're thinking about if somehow you saved your outdoor plants and you still have them, which is probably rare. I feel like this morning was your biggest hurdle, and now you're probably good the rest of the week. Which is crazy to think. We're talking, into the November 10th, 11th area, but. And as you said, the weekend also looking at another very weak and probably dry frontal passage on Friday, and then another giant high pressure area.
Notice the area of low pressure out in the Midwest. That is likely going to be our next potential rainmaker arriving Monday sort of time frame. But leading up to that, we're just, again, bone dry.
Same deal.
No real issues to speak of. And we'll see if this holds together. I mean, cautiously optimistic that we could get some rain, but it's not a lot. It's not what we need. We need a persistent pattern instead of dry conditions, a little bit more wet conditions.
So maybe maybe somehow, and this is our latest tropical depression and headed forecast to become a hurricane and head into the Gulf. Like maybe somehow we get some sort of remnants, and this would be way down the line. I mean, it's not even going to be into the Gulf until this weekend, but typically this time of year, if you're looking for some major rain, some heavy rain, it is somehow tropical related, whether it's something that comes up the coast in some sort of remnant form. So again, it would probably be almost 2 weeks from now, but maybe somehow this breaks the pattern once it eventually makes landfall and gets up here with some wet weather.
So expected to make a landfall in Cuba near Havana, just south of Havana, as a Category 1 storm, go into the open waters of the Gulf of Mexico. I hope that it does actually decrease in strength, because anytime you get a system into the Gulf of Mexico, it either can go away, which is rare, or it makes landfall somewhere.
Right.
It depends on if it's Mexico or if it's the United States, but it will make a landfall if it stays together.
And it's still a ways out there. I looked at some of the spaghetti charts. Like a lot of them have landfall up towards New Orleans or Florida Panhandle. Many of them keep it tracking west. So we got a ways to go with this one. Certainly will bring some heavy rainfall to the areas down in the Gulf. But this is something just sort of to stay tuned to as the week goes on. If you've on there along the Gulf Coast, we'll keep you updated. The early indication is that it's weakening later on in the time period. I think there's some wind shear that gets involved, but we'll see. It's a ways off.
And so this is the latest satellite image of that storm. Doesn't look like much, but it is expected to form into that tropical storm in the coming days. And you mentioned the spaghetti charts. Pretty good consensus taking it over western Cuba. And then, like you said, will it stay to the north or will it veer it off to the west? Yeah,
a little ways to go, but obviously we'll keep track. And it will be Rafael, maybe even as early as this evening, get a tropical storm name. So we are getting down on the list. Now, the season technically ends November 30th, the tropical season. So we're definitely getting towards the end here. But I think the forecast for the season was pretty good. I think most folks were forecasting a very active season, getting through most of the names. And that's exactly what we had.
Yep, and we've had those pretty bad hurricanes, all those impacts that we saw with Milton and Helene. If we could put the tropical season to bed today, it would still be a really, really bad season, especially if you were impacted. So here's the latest forecast today. I think we're going to struggle to get out of the upper 40s in a lot of spots. So we'll call it 50 degrees, but it is a chilly day for sure. Temperatures increasing, however, for Tuesday and Wednesday back into the 70s. If we were to hit 77 in Boston, that would be a record temperature, and then starting to trail off ever so slightly through Thursday and Friday, and a seasonable weekend ahead.
But again, something you don't see anywhere in that 7-day is rain.
Right.
And that, again, maybe if we were to go out one more day on Monday, but much needed. Again, next couple of days, do not, if you're thinking about, getting your leaves together, really, no burning, nothing of that nature.
Yeah, definitely follow local officials' recommendations when it comes to that. And of course, if a red flag warning were to be issued, we would bring that to you. Eric Fisher has the latest forecast coming up this evening. Terry, appreciate you spending this Monday with me.
Yes, very good.
We still don't have a name.
Welcome to November.
Welcome to November, indeed. If you do have a name for this video, podcast, weather chat, whatever you want to call it, let us know in the comments below. But otherwise, have a great Monday. Be safe, everyone.